A young food delivery girl struggles to support her family while caring for her sick mother. When she breaks down in tears after being humiliated by a wealthy customer, a millionaire CEO witnesses the scene and decides to step in a way that will not only change her life, but also touch the heart of the entire city of Chicago. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago, each drop hitting the pavement like tiny hammers against my already shattered confidence. I stood there outside the luxury apartment building on North Lake Shore Drive, my delivery bag still warm with someone's $30 pasta that I'd never be able to afford myself, and I could feel the tears mixing with the raindrops on my cheeks. My name is Sofia Martinez, and at 23 I thought I had life figured out. I was wrong, dead wrong. The humiliation was still burning in my chest. Mr. Henderson, the man in apartment 4B, had just spent 10 minutes screaming at me because his truffle risotto was apparently 3 degrees colder than he expected. 3 degrees. He'd thrown the receipt at my face, called me just another worthless delivery girl who can't do her job right, and slammed the door so hard that the hallway echoed for what felt like an eternity. But it wasn't really about the risotto. It was about everything else. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket with trembling fingers, checking my earnings for the day. $43.27. After gas and the app's commission, I'd barely have enough to cover Mom's medication tonight, let alone tomorrow's groceries. The number stared back at me like a cruel joke, and that's when the dam finally broke. I'd been holding it together for 6 months. 6 months since Mom's multiple sclerosis diagnosis turned our world upside down. 6 months since her medical bills started piling up faster than I could count them. 6 months since I'd dropped out of Northwestern University, leaving behind my dreams of becoming a teacher, to work 3 different gig jobs just to keep us afloat. The delivery job was supposed to be temporary, just until Mom gets better, I told myself. But MS doesn't get better. It only gets more expensive. Standing there in the rain, I let myself cry for the first time in weeks. Really cry. The kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep in your chest, where you keep all the fear and exhaustion and desperation locked away so you can function during daylight hours. My shoulders shook as I thought about the eviction notice tucked away in my backpack, the one that gave us 14 more days to come up with $2,000 in back rent. I was drowning, and nobody seemed to notice. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The voice was gentle, concerned, and definitely male. I quickly wiped my face with the back of my hand, trying to compose myself. The last thing I needed was some stranger thinking I was having a complete mental breakdown on the street, even though that's exactly what was happening. I turned around and found myself looking up at a tall man in his early 30s, wearing what looked like an expensive charcoal suit despite the rain. His dark hair was slightly damp, and his brown eyes held a kindness that caught me off guard. He was standing under the building's awning, having apparently just come outside. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "Just having a rough day." He studied my face for a moment, and I could see him taking in my soaked delivery uniform, my red-rimmed eyes, and the defeat written across my features. Instead of walking away like most people would have, he stepped closer. "I saw what happened upstairs," he said quietly, "with Mr. Henderson. I live in 4A, right next door." My heart sank even further. Great. Another wealthy resident who probably thought I was making too much noise in the hallway with my emotional breakdown. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you. I was just leaving." "No, wait." He held up his hand gently. "You didn't disturb anyone. I wanted to tell you that what he did was completely unacceptable. No one should be treated that way, especially someone just trying to do their job." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline or the lecture about how I needed to develop thicker skin. It never came. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. "How much did you lose on that delivery?" he asked. What do you mean? Henderson didn't pay you, right? How much was the order worth?" I hesitated. This felt like charity, and I'd been raised to work for everything I had. But the number on my phone screen flashed in my memory. $37 with tip, I admitted. Without hesitation, he pulled out 2 $20 bills and held them out to me. "This is for the work you already did. You shouldn't lose money because someone else decided to have a bad day." I looked at the money, then back at his face. There was no pity there, no condescension, just decency. It had been so long since someone had shown me basic human decency that I almost started crying again. "I can't take this," I said, even though every practical part of my brain was screaming at me to grab the money and run. "You don't even know me." "You're right, I don't." but I know what it's like to work hard for something and have someone try to take it away from you." He stepped closer, and I caught a hint of expensive cologne mixed with rain. "Please, let me do this small thing." The rain was getting heavier, and I was starting to shiver in my thin jacket. My phone buzzed with another delivery request, probably across town, and I knew I needed to get moving if I wanted to make enough for Mom's evening medications. I took the money, my fingers brushing against his for just a moment. "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea how much this means to me right now." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I think I might have a better idea than you realize." As I walked back toward my beaten-up Honda Civic, I couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger had just done more than give me $40. He'd given me back a piece of my dignity that Mr. Henderson had tried to steal. I didn't know then that this moment would change everything, that the man in the expensive suit was about to turn my world upside down in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. 3 days had passed since the encounter outside the luxury apartment building, but I couldn't stop thinking about the kind stranger who'd restored my faith in humanity, even if just for a moment. His $40 had bought Mom's medications that night and put gas in my car for the next day's deliveries. Small gestures, I was learning, could move mountains when you're barely surviving. Thursday morning found me back in the same downtown area, but this time I was delivering coffee and pastries from a trendy cafe on Michigan Avenue. The order was going to the 42nd floor of a gleaming office tower that seemed to pierce the Chicago sky. As I rode the elevator up, checking my reflection in the polished doors, I tried to shake off the nervousness that always came with delivering to these corporate buildings. The people here lived in a different world, one where $40 wasn't the difference between eating and going hungry. The elevator chimed softly as it reached my destination, and the doors opened to reveal a reception area that looked like something out of a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, and everything from the marble floors to the contemporary artwork screamed money and power. "Delivery for Marcus Chen," I announced to the receptionist, a perfectly put-together woman whose makeup probably cost more than I made in a week. "Oh yes, he's expecting you," she said with a smile that seemed genuine. "Conference room 3, just down that hallway to your right." I followed her directions, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpeting. The nameplate outside the conference room read, "Chen Enterprises, Executive Meeting in Progress." I knocked gently and waited. "Come in," came a familiar voice from inside. I pushed open the door and nearly dropped the bag of coffee and pastries. Sitting at the head of a massive conference table, surrounded by what looked like a dozen executives in expensive suits, was the man from Tuesday night. The same kind brown eyes, the same gentle expression, but now he was clearly in his element, commanding the room with a quiet confidence that made everything about our previous encounter suddenly make sense. He looked up from the documents spread in front of him, and I watched recognition dawn in his eyes. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind that reaches your eyes and makes you feel like you're sharing a secret. "Sophia," he said simply, and somehow he remembered my name even though I was certain I'd never told him. The entire room turned to look at me, and I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Here I was, the delivery girl who'd been sobbing in the rain, standing in front of what was obviously a very important business meeting. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I stammered. "I have your coffee order, Mr." I realized with horror that I still didn't know his name. "Marcus," he said, standing up from his chair. "Marcus Chen." He turned to the room full of executives. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sophia Martinez. Sophia, please bring the order here." As I approached the table, I noticed the way the other people in the room looked at me, not with disdain or impatience, but with genuine curiosity. It was clear that Marcus Chen commanded respect, and by extension, so did anyone he chose to acknowledge. "Sophia is one of the hardest working people in this city," Marcus continued, as I set the bag down on the table. "She's currently working multiple jobs to support her family, and she does it with more grace and determination than most people I know in business." I stared at him in shock. How could he possibly know that? We'd talked for maybe 5 minutes in the rain, and I'd been too emotional to share much detail about my situation. One of the executives, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, spoke up. "It's nice to meet you, Sophia. Marcus was just telling us about his new initiative." "New initiative?" I echoed, looking between them confused. Marcus gestured to the documents on the table. "We were discussing the launch of the Chen Foundation's Workforce Development Program. It's designed to help hard-working individuals who are facing temporary financial hardships get back on their feet through education, job training, and emergency assistance." My heart started beating faster, though I wasn't sure why. There was something in the way he was looking at me, something that suggested this wasn't just a coincidence. The foundation will provide full scholarships for college completion, including living expenses, for qualifying candidates, Marcus continued. We're also partnering with local businesses to provide internships and eventual job placement in fields that match the recipient's career goals. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic far below. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting for some kind of reaction, but my brain seemed to have stopped processing information. That sounds incredible, I finally managed. I'm sure it will help a lot of people. Marcus walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of me. Sophia, I'd like you to be our first scholarship recipient. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, shaking my head instinctively. What? No, I couldn't possibly. You could, absolutely. And you should, the silver-haired woman interjected gently. Marcus has told us about your situation. You were studying education at Northwestern before family circumstances forced you to leave, correct? I nodded numbly, wondering how he could possibly know that level of detail about my life. The scholarship would cover your remaining tuition, books, housing, and provide a monthly stipend for living expenses, Marcus explained. In exchange, you'd agree to work with the foundation on outreach programs, sharing your story to help identify other candidates who could benefit from similar assistance. If this part of the story has touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this, because what comes next will surprise you even more. I don't understand, I whispered. Why me? You don't even know me. Marcus's expression grew serious, and for a moment the entire room seemed to fade away until it was just the two of us talking. 3 days ago, I watched someone who was clearly struggling still show up to work, still try to do her job with dignity despite being treated terribly. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. He paused, glancing at the view of the city beyond the windows. But there's something else, Sophia. Something I think you should know about why this program exists in the first place. The anticipation in the room was palpable. Even the executives seemed to lean forward slightly, as if they were about to hear something important. My mother was a house cleaner, Marcus said quietly. She worked 3 jobs to support my sister and me after my father died. I've been exactly where you are now, Sophia. I know what it feels like to choose between groceries and rent money. I know what it's like to watch someone you love get sicker because you can't afford their medication. My eyes filled with tears for the second time this week, but these were different tears. These were tears of hope. The following Monday morning, I found myself sitting in the financial aid office at Northwestern University, holding a stack of documents that felt surreal in my hands. Marcus had moved fast, faster than I thought possible. Within 72 hours of our meeting in his conference room, lawyers had drawn up scholarship agreements. University administrators had been contacted, and a complete financial plan had been put into motion. But the biggest shock came when I arrived at the bursar's office to discuss my re-enrollment. Miss Martinez, the financial aid counselor said, looking up from her computer screen with a puzzled expression. According to our records, your entire outstanding balance has been paid in full, not just for this semester, but for all remaining coursework needed to complete your degree. I stared at her, my mouth opening and closing without sound coming out. I'm sorry, what? That's impossible. I owe almost $30,000. She turned her monitor toward me, and there it was in black and white, a zero balance, paid in full by the Chen Foundation, with a note that additional funds had been deposited into a special account for books, supplies, and living expenses. There's more, she continued, clearly as amazed as I was. You've also been pre-enrolled in an accelerated program that will allow you to complete your education degree in 18 months, instead of the typical 2 years, with a guaranteed student teaching placement at one of Chicago's top elementary schools. I walked out of that office in a daze, clutching the paperwork that represented a completely different future than the one I'd woken up to that morning. But even more overwhelming than the financial relief was the phone call I'd received from Northwestern Memorial Hospital the night before. Miss Martinez, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from the MS Treatment Center, the voice had said. I'm calling about your mother's care plan. We've received notification that her medical expenses will now be covered through a special healthcare assistance program. She's been approved for the newest treatment protocol, which should significantly slow the progression of her symptoms. I'd nearly dropped the phone. Mom's medications alone cost $1,500 a month, and the advanced treatments Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned the ones our insurance wouldn't cover, were completely out of reach for someone making $40 a day delivering food. There must be some mistake, I'd told Dr. Williams. We can't afford— There's no mistake, she'd assured me. The Chen Foundation has established a comprehensive healthcare fund specifically for families facing medical hardships. Your mother qualifies, and her treatment can begin immediately. That conversation had led to another sleepless night, but this time, it wasn't from worry. It was from the overwhelming realization that Marcus Chen wasn't just offering me a scholarship, he was rebuilding our entire lives from the ground up. Now standing on Northwestern's campus for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I was seeing everything with new eyes. Students walked past me carrying backpacks and coffee cups, heading to classes I'd thought I'd never be able to attend again. The autumn leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, and for the first time in months, I noticed how beautiful everything looked. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee? There's something I'd like to show you. Marcus." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from him at a quiet cafe near campus, watching him scroll through photos on his tablet. He looked different today, more relaxed, wearing jeans and a simple navy sweater instead of the expensive suits I'd seen him in before. "I wanted you to see these," he said, turning the tablet toward me. "These are photos from when I was your age." The first photo showed a young man who was unmistakably Marcus, but thinner and wearing a uniform from what looked like a fast food restaurant. His smile was tired, and there were dark circles under his eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. "Pizza delivery," he explained with a self-deprecating laugh. 3 nights a week plus weekends. I was studying business at DePaul during the day and working every other hour I could find. He swiped to the next photo. Marcus in what appeared to be a hospital room, sitting beside a small woman who shared his eyes and smile. She was connected to various machines, and both of them looked exhausted but determined. "Mom, during her cancer treatment," he said quietly. "We couldn't afford the experimental therapy that might have saved her life. She died 6 months before I graduated college." I felt my heart break a little for the young man in that photo, and suddenly Marcus's determination to help my family made perfect sense. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He nodded, then swiped to another photo, this one showing him in a cap and gown at graduation, holding his diploma with tears streaming down his face. "She never got to see me graduate," he continued, "but she made me promise that if I ever had the chance to help someone else's family avoid what we went through, I would take it." Marcus closed the tablet and looked directly at me. "Sophia, what I'm about to tell you is something only my board of directors and my closest advisors know. The Chen Foundation isn't just some charitable side project. It's the entire point of everything I've built." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When I started my first tech company 10 years ago, I made myself a promise. Every dollar I earned, every success I achieved, would ultimately serve one purpose: making sure that hardworking families like yours, like mine was, never have to choose between dreams and survival." The weight of his words settled over me like a warm blanket. This wasn't charity, this was a mission. "The scholarship program we're launching will help 50 families this year," Marcus continued. "Next year we're planning for 200. But it's not just about money, Sophia. It's about changing the entire narrative around what's possible for people who are willing to work hard but need someone to believe in them. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, tap the red button that says subscribe. It's free and it helps me continue sharing these incredible moments that prove kindness still exists in our world." "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Marcus smiled, and I saw not the successful CEO, but the young man who'd once delivered pizzas to pay for his mother's medical bills. "Because I want you to be more than just our first scholarship recipient, Sophia. I want you to help me build something that will change thousands of lives. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility?" Looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and determination there, I realized that my answer would determine not just my own future, but the futures of countless other families who were struggling just like mine had been. 6 months later, I stood behind the podium at the Chicago Convention Center, looking out at an audience of over 3,000 people. The banner behind me read, "Chen Foundation Annual Gala, Transforming Lives, Building Dreams," and I could hardly believe I was about to address this crowd as the Foundation's first program director. The journey from crying delivery girl to standing here had been nothing short of miraculous, but it hadn't been easy. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of completing my education degree, while simultaneously helping Marcus develop what would become the most comprehensive workforce development program in Illinois. "Good evening, Chicago," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. 6 months ago, I was standing in the rain outside a luxury apartment building, crying because a customer had just humiliated me, and I didn't know how I was going to afford my mother's medication that night. The room fell silent, and I could see people leaning forward in their seats. In the front row, Mum sat in her wheelchair, not because the MS had progressed, but because the new treatments had actually improved her condition so much that she tired less easily when she used it for longer outings like tonight. Beside her sat Marcus, his eyes filled with pride and encouragement. "That night a stranger showed me kindness when I needed it most," I continued. "But what I didn't know then was that this man had a vision that would change not just my life, but the lives of hundreds of families across our city." I gestured to the large screen behind me, which displayed a photo montage of the Foundation's first year. "In the past 6 months, the Chen Foundation has awarded full scholarships to 150 individuals. We've covered medical expenses for 87 families dealing with chronic illnesses. We've helped 32 people start their own small businesses, and we've created over 200 permanent jobs through our workforce development partnerships." The applause was thunderous, but I held up my hand gently. "These aren't just statistics. These are real people with real stories, and tonight I want you to meet some of them." The first video testimonial began playing on the screen. It showed Janet Rodriguez, a 38-year-old mother of 3 who'd been working as a hotel housekeeper while studying nursing at night. "Before the Chen Foundation, I was studying nursing while working 60 hours a week cleaning hotel rooms." Janet's voice filled the auditorium. "I was exhausted. My kids barely saw me, and I was still 2 years away from graduating because I could only afford to take 1 class at a time. The foundation didn't just pay for my education, they provided childcare support so I could attend classes, and they connected me with a study group of other scholarship recipients. I graduated last month and just started my dream job at Northwestern Memorial Hospital." The audience erupted in applause as the real Janet stood up from her seat in the middle of the auditorium, waving and wiping away tears. The next video showed David Kim, a 24-year-old veteran who'd been struggling with PTSD and homelessness. "I came back from Afghanistan with invisible wounds and no clear direction," David's voice narrated over footage of him working in a gleaming tech office. "The Chen Foundation didn't just give me housing and mental health support, they helped me discover I had a talent for computer programming. They paid for my coding boot camp, and now I'm a software developer at a startup downtown. More importantly, I'm mentoring other veterans through the Foundation's peer support program." As David stood to acknowledge the applause, I noticed several people in the audience wiping their eyes. "But tonight," I said, returning to the podium, "I want to tell you about something even more incredible that's happened. Something that shows how kindness can multiply beyond anything we imagined." The screen behind me displayed a map of Chicago, with dozens of glowing dots scattered across it. "Each of these dots represents what we call a ripple effect," I explained. "These are acts of kindness and support that our scholarship recipients have initiated in their own communities, inspired by the help they received from the Foundation." I clicked to the next slide, showing a photo of a small storefront with a sign reading, "Maria's Kitchen, Pay It Forward Meals." Maria Gonzalez received a small business loan from our foundation to open her dream restaurant. But Maria did something extraordinary. She instituted a Pay It Forward program where customers can purchase meals for people who can't afford them. In just 4 months, her restaurant has served over 2,000 free meals to families in need. The applause was warm and sustained. I could see Marcus nodding approvingly from the front row. "Then there's Kevin Johnson," I continued, showing a photo of a young man teaching a group of children. Kevin used his education scholarship to become a math teacher, but he didn't stop there. He started a free weekend tutoring program in his old neighborhood, and he's recruited 12 other Foundation scholarship recipients to volunteer as tutors. They've helped over 100 kids improve their grades this year. The stories continued, each one more inspiring than the last. Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, who became a nurse and now volunteers at free health clinics every weekend. Robert Williams, who started a landscaping business and employs exclusively formerly homeless individuals, providing them with job training and steady income. Lisa Park, who became a social worker and created a support group for children of parents with chronic illnesses. "What we discovered," I said, looking directly into the audience, "is that when you help someone rebuild their life, they don't just succeed, they become a force for good in their community. Every person we've helped has found ways to help others." I paused, taking a deep breath before sharing the most personal part of my speech. But there's one more story I need to tell you tonight. A story about a woman named Carmen Martinez. Mum's photo appeared on the screen, a recent one where she was smiling broadly, looking healthier than she had in years. Carmen is my mother. 6 months ago, she was declining rapidly from multiple sclerosis, and I was dropping out of college to work 3 jobs to pay for her basic medications. Tonight, thanks to the Foundation's healthcare assistance program, she's stable, thriving, and has become something I never expected. I looked down at Mom, who was beaming up at me with tears in her eyes. She's become an advocate and volunteer coordinator for other families dealing with chronic illnesses. She spends 30 hours a week helping newly diagnosed patients navigate insurance systems, connecting them with resources, and providing emotional support. Last month, she helped 42 families access treatment they couldn't afford. The standing ovation that followed was the longest of the evening. I watched as Mom wiped her eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the recognition. What comes next is even stronger. And to not miss how this incredible story ends, tap the subscribe button now. It's free, and you'll be with me in every new story I share. 6 months ago, I said as the applause died down, Marcus Chen saw a delivery girl crying in the rain and chose to act with kindness. Tonight, that single act of compassion has created a network of hope that spans our entire city and is growing every day. I turned to look at Marcus, who had stood up and was applauding with the rest of the audience. But here's what Marcus taught me that I want to leave you with tonight. We all have the power to be that stranger who changes someone's life. We all encounter people who are struggling, people who just need someone to believe in them. The question isn't whether we have the resources to help, it's whether we have the courage to care. The screen behind me displayed the Foundation's new initiative, the Everyday Heroes program, which would provide micro-grants to ordinary citizens who wanted to help their neighbors in crisis. Starting tomorrow, any person in Chicago can apply for grants of up to $5,000 to help someone in their community. A teacher who wants to help a student's family pay rent, a neighbor who wants to cover someone's medical bills, a co-worker who wants to help a colleague get job training. We're putting the power to change lives directly into your hands. The final standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. As the crowd began to disperse, people weren't just talking about the Foundation. They were talking about who in their own lives they could help, what problems in their communities they could solve. Later that evening, as Marcus, Mom, and I sat in a quiet restaurant celebrating the gala's success, Marcus raised his glass in a toast. "To Sophia," he said, "who taught me that sometimes the person you help becomes the person who helps you build something bigger than either of you could have imagined alone." As we clinked glasses, I realized that the delivery girl who had cried in the rain 6 months ago was gone forever. In her place was someone I was still getting to know, someone who had learned that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or success, but the decision to see the humanity in others and act on it. The Chen Foundation had started with one act of kindness on a rainy Tuesday night. Tonight, it had become a movement that would ripple through Chicago for generations to come. And it all began because someone chose to care.